Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this reading vlog, we are going to be partaking in Winterween. Alright, so before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, did you partake in Winterween? Did you read anything you absolutely loved? Let's talk about it. So if you're unfamiliar, Winterween is a readathon that is hosted by Gabby at Gabby Reads. All relevant information for it is linked in the description down below. Obviously, if you're watching this reading vlog, it is now ended, but there's also usually an additional round of it in summer for Summerween. So if you're intrigued, check it out. Going into this readathon, I honestly did not have a set TBR. I had a list of possibilities for pretty much every single prompt. So when it came time to start reading for this video, it was honestly a little hard to decide what I wanted to read, but my library holds ended up deciding for me because I could get audiobooks of 2 of them, but I couldn't get an audiobook of this one, meaning I decided to start with This Cursed House by Del Sandine to read physically this morning. We in Texas have actually had a bit of a, I'm gonna say snowstorm, because it's a snowstorm for us. Having lived in Ohio, I can tell you this is not an actual snowstorm, but still, meaning, you know, there's a lot of ice on the ground. We are not equipped to handle it, and on top of that, most people in this area don't really know how to drive in it. So effectively, the city has been shut down for the last 2 days, which honestly was a great way to start Winterween. I mean, we actually had snow on the ground for it, so it genuinely feels like winter for once. So I worked from home today, but I had a little bit of a lazy start, and I began This Cursed House while I drank my coffee and had some puppy cuddles. Then after work, I promptly came in here, started the fire, and have basically been sitting here for the rest of the night. Then while Josh took a test for his class, I did some more reading. So now I am currently at 96 pages into this book. I feel like I can give you a pretty decent synopsis. I got this from Aardvark mostly because the Southern Gothic element really sold it to me. We're following this young woman who is fleeing from Chicago after a rough few events in her life, and she needs a new start. She ended up receiving an offer letter for this job in New Orleans that is crazy good money, includes home and board, so she didn't really ask any questions and just headed right on down. But once she arrives to this plantation, she pretty immediately knows that something weird is going on. Turns out this family actually believes that they are cursed and that she is the only person who can break said curse. I will say the New Orleans setting is perfect so far. I think the author has really encapsulated it in the writing. Stuffy and overbearing. You've got people from all walks of life. You've got some absolutely delicious Southern cooking. I mean, I am desperately wanting some etouffee. I also would not complain about a beignet right now. Obviously, off the synopsis, I was immediately suspicious of the family, so I kind of was prepared for some weird turn to happen with them. And while it did take a little bit to get there, once we finally did start getting some answers, I was intrigued. I've been in for the ride on this. The downfall so far for me is in the motivations of the main character. We're told about a lot of the stuff she experienced while living up in Chicago, and that's kind of the driving force of why she is sticking around with this family. But there's certain situations that happen where she finally starts to take a step forward for herself, only to quickly retract. But then on top of that, she keeps repeatedly planning to do one thing and then ends up doing something else. And it's frustrating and also repetitive to read. However, I'm still intrigued. It took a little while to really understand like what this curse is. And honestly, I was shocked that it took her so long to like start asking questions to get real answers about the curse. But now that we're finally getting those, now that we're finally kind of seeing behind the veneer that this family has put on, I'm getting more intrigued. I'm getting more invested, and I want to know, like, what do they think she can do to get rid of this curse? Because it's not as though she has been tied to the occult in any real way throughout her life, barring the fact that she can see ghosts. So overall, it is going pretty well so far. I'm really liking certain aspects of it. I do hope that we'll see some growth of the main character, Gemma. I'm just worried that she'll start to grate on me. Apart from this one, I also am in the middle of Cattle and Men by Anna, oh shoot, I'm not gonna be able to remember her name, but this is a little novella that I have been reading on my phone every once in a while. Started the day with this actually, and it seems very reminiscent of like Tender is the Flesh, where it's kind of a critique on like en masse meat packaging plants, but also like the morals tied into that. I live in beef country, so like yes, there is some gruesome imagery going on, but like it's not anything I'm not familiar with already. However, the main character that we're following, Edgar, also is like very caring of the cows, even though he is the one in charge of putting them down, I'll say. And he's really critical of other workers if they're cruel to the animals. So I'm curious on like what discussions around that are going to get dived into more, because I'm not very far into this. Hey friends, so good news, not only because I got a lot of reading of This Cursed House done today, but also my audiobook for it came in from one of my libraries. So that works out perfectly. That means I can continue working on this audibly. So now, excluding my manga and my novella, the hope is that I can kind of focus on one novel for each prompt at a time and read it both physically and on audio. That way, hopefully, maybe I'll actually complete the little goal I set for myself of reading a separate book for every single prompt. Is that gonna actually happen? I don't know, we'll find out. Like I said, I did get another 100 pages of This Cursed House read today. I am currently at 199, and this is a little bit of a frustrating read so far, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm really loving the atmosphere of the story. I do feel completely enveloped into the story when I am reading this, and I do feel like the Southern Gothic aspect is definitely coming through. The way the plot is laid out is keeping me super intrigued. I have so many questions. I want to know what is going on. I am here for the answers, like I am here for the ride, but my lord, I'm getting really frustrated at how the author is like progressing things, because it kind of feels like there's no rhyme or reason to why the characters do what they do. It just seems like the author is making them do these things to progress the story. It doesn't feel authentic to what we've seen of the characters. For example, with Gemma, she swings back and forth so dramatically between like trusting this family and hoping that they accept her, to not trusting this family, wanting to just abandon them. And every once in a while, one of her decisions will be based on something that happened to her, but more often than not, it feels like she's really hot and cold with it. You can't really guess what her next move is going to be, and it's irritating. Not only that, but also when it comes to the family characters, sometimes they're, you know, all on her to figure out what's going on with this curse, but then other times they're lying to her, they're hiding things from her, and it doesn't really make sense, because their whole reason of getting her here is so that she can fix the curse. But then like she'll do things trying to get rid of the curse, and they get mad at her for what she's doing. Make it make sense. So that's frustrating, but at the same time, like I said, I'm invested. I'm curious. I want to know what's going on. I want to figure out if like she actually can fix this, or if, you know, it's actually just all in the family's head and this is like a series of really unfortunate coincidences. There have been a few twists, a few reveals that have been going on, and I will say that a lot of the themes that are going on within the family do feel very Southern Gothic-esque, and so I'm enjoying that. There's been one or two of them that I have seen coming, but then there's also been one or two twists that really did surprise me, and once again just like grabbed me and pulled me back into the story. So this has been a frustrating reading experience. It's gonna be very up and down on my cop pile when I rate it. I just know. So yeah, hoping maybe that I will get more of this read tomorrow. I will say though, it is surprisingly long. Like, it feels as though I should be 2/3 of the way through this book, and yet I'm probably only around the halfway point. When it comes to the writing style itself, I do feel like you can see that this is Sandine's first work. There's just some aspects that are repetitive. Whenever Gemma will be thinking back on an event we saw happen prior, the author will insert like a piece of dialogue again to remind us of it, and I don't feel like I need the hand-holding for it. You can just insinuate that's what Gemma's looking back on. So I feel like if maybe some of that was removed, this would get cut down a little bit and maybe it would move a hair faster. Yes, it is Gothic, so obviously it's going to be slow moving, but like, it is starting to drag just a hair. So along with this, I did read a little bit more of Cattle and Men this morning. Not too much, honestly, just because I had a headache and I felt like reading on my phone was not helping matters. So that's why I alternated to reading physically. Apart from that, Josh and I had a pretty lazy day, which was really nice. We got some donkeys, and then we went out to dinner tonight, went to an arcade that was pretty fun, and then went grocery shopping. We're real adults. Hey y'all, happy Monday. I hope you're having a terrific one. Unfortunately, I did not think to film a talking update yesterday, but I had a pretty good day overall. I made some delicious cinnamon rolls, which I'd really been craving, and then I worked some more on This Cursed House by Del Sandine, and I got like another 100 pages of this read yesterday, which is really great. Then Josh and I started into what was supposed to be our really big project of the day, getting our curtains hung up. Unfortunately, it ended up being a whole freaking trial, and none of them got hung up. So my dad's coming over tomorrow to help us out with that. But we ended up, doing the usual chores around the house and stuff and got all that done. I did some editing. And then we watched that movie Tag with like Ed Helms, John Hamm, Jake Johnson. It was really fun. It was like ridiculous. And it had a really dark thing in it, but it was fun. I had a good time with it. Back to This Cursed House. Even though my audiobook for this did come in, I ended up reading it mostly physically yesterday. Like I said, I got about 100 pages more. And then today while I was at work, I listened to the audiobook of this and finished it out. And I have to say, the amount of time I put into this book was not worth the final reveal, especially in the face of the fact that like there are surprising reveals throughout the story that did catch me off guard, that I did feel like were well handled. But the finale, don't get me wrong, like it's a terrible thing that happened, and I do still agree that this family is awful, which like makes sense for a gothic story, but it just didn't feel like it warranted 350 pages of buildup. On top of that, there's like this ongoing theme throughout the story of forgiveness and like how forgiving people allows you freedom. And I didn't really love that, especially in the scheme of some of the themes going on throughout the story, like toxic family and racism, pretty brutal racism. So like I get what the author was doing there, but I don't think it quite worked with what was going on here. I did like the talks around colorism and the way we were able to see the daily struggles Gemma had as a Black woman in this time, but I kind of wish the author would have utilized those a little bit more in the story itself. There were a few creepy moments, there were a few moments that were rather unsettling, but overall, like, I at no point in this book was I ever scared. There was one death that was pretty gruesome, I will say. But apart from that, the horror itself is very, very slow moving gothic, but it never felt all consuming like some gothic stories do. Yeah, like I said, this just wasn't really satisfying in the end, unfortunately, but I finished it. It's the first book down for Summerween, and so I'm gonna be focusing on that. After I finished that one, I took a little bit of time, marinated on my thoughts, typed up my review at lunch. Then when I came back for the rest of the day, I decided to start into the audiobook of The Breakdown by B.A. Paris. This could actually fulfill two of the prompts. One is obviously read a horror or thriller book, and the other is to read a horror or thriller book that is more than 5 years old. This is my second book from the author, and I was hesitant going into it, honestly, because my first book from this author did not go particularly well, unfortunately. And it looks like I was right to be nervous. So in the story, we're following a woman who, unfortunately, her life seems to be unraveling, specifically her memory. Her mother actually suffered from early onset dementia and passed not too long before the start of this book. At the very beginning, our main character is returning home from a night out with the girls, and she goes the back road that her husband told her not to take specifically, and comes across this woman who is in her car, just stopped on the side of the road. She slows down, tries to see if this woman needs any help, but she doesn't really react in any way, and so she figures she must be fine and ends up leaving. Next day, unfortunately, something terrible happened to this woman. Though the main character herself seems to be losing her grip, losing her sanity, the one thing she can always remember is the events of that night. She can always remember this woman making eye contact with her. She can always remember the guilt she felt at abandoning her, and things kind of evolve from there. Unfortunately, with this book, it seems like Paris's writing of thrillers just does not work for me, because I had a lot of the same issues with this book that I did with Behind Closed Doors. It's just really predictable. The author sets things up, but it doesn't feel like a mystery because the clues she leaves for you are so obvious if you know what you're looking for. The second time the main character has one of these memory spells, I started to put it together 2 more times and I figured out another layer of the mystery. It feels like rather than creating a mystery that is thrilling to watch unfold, the author gives you the tiniest bit of a mystery, but eventually answers that question really fast. And then you have to watch as the character works through this like crazy line of events. But I don't care about the author's characters enough to, actually stay invested. So when I could figure out what direction this was going, I just put it down and I looked up spoilers. I was right. I did guess exactly what was going on. I mean, there was one element of the mystery that I didn't particularly expect, but I also didn't care. So what does that say? Yeah, so this was a DNF. If I have time, maybe I'll pick up another book to like replace this one. If I don't, I'm gonna let the DNF stand. And I'll just do my best not to scream into this microphone. Hey guys, guess who has a new mic? I am super excited about it. I tried out a different one and it did not go well. So this is our second try at a wireless one, and I think it's going better. It at least sounds a lot better on Premiere Pro than the last one did. But hey y'all, I have a fair amount to talk to y'all about. I did not start Into Dark Places last night. I actually ended up reading my manga pick for the readathon for the final prompt of Winterween. So I actually started into Mieruko-chan by Tomoki Izumi, I believe is the author. I don't quite know all of the manga terminology yet, but it's a slice of life comedy, but the main character can see ghosts and they're sort of terrifying. However, Miko is determined not to let these ghosts know that she can see them, so she just has to like remain calm and ends up in some really silly and funny situations because of that. Or, for example, as we learn towards the end of the first volume, her best friend Hannah is like such a positive, outgoing, bubbly person that these ghosts are literally like attracted to her spirit, which is obviously really unfortunate for Miko. So every time a new one latches onto Hannah, she like does everything she can to get this new ghost to go away. But at the same time, she has to once again make it seem like she doesn't know they're there. She doesn't want to freak Hannah out either because she's a real scaredy cat. Josh and I actually watched the anime of this a while back and really enjoyed it. I will say both the manga and the anime have a good deal of fan service, at least at the start. The anime did calm down as things went on, and thankfully, even by the end of the first volume, we were kind of pushing away from that, and a actual plot was starting to develop. The anime is only a single season, and from what happened in the manga, I'm guessing it's probably only like maybe the first 3 volumes, so it won't take too long for me to move past where the anime has finished off. But I enjoyed it. It was a fun little start, very easy, short read, and it is another manga series I have ended up starting into, which is not the end of the world because I do want to read more manga, but I do need to work on my series. Along with Winterween, it also completes a prompt on my horror bingo that's being hosted by Wicked Reading, so that works out great for me, double counting. Love it. Had a pretty good day overall, had a lunch meeting, and then thankfully while I was gone today, my dad came over and was very kind and put up the curtain rods. We actually have curtains in our bedroom now. You can't see it. This is the one window that we don't have a curtain on. While I was at work, whenever I had some time, I did listen to the audiobook of Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. And it is Gillian Flynn. Or was it? Shit, I'm never gonna remember how you pronounce this author's name. So this is following a woman whose brother was a family annihilator, and she was the only survivor and actually the sole testimony who ended up putting him away. But she was like 7 when this happened. Now she is 30. She has really lived majority of her life riding on the coattails of that situation. Honestly, just off of other people's kindness. She has never had a job. She's never graduated from any higher education. She is like the most unmotivated, unresponsible person ever, and pretty quickly she started to grate my gears. However, she is approached by this group that's essentially like, it feels so icky to say, like a true crime convention, and they want her to come basically kind of pick her brain about the case. But all of the people who are there specifically for this case all believe that her brother is innocent. This was all due to the satanic panic, and he was just kind of an odd kid that unfortunately had a bad relationship with his mom and got labeled what's the word I want? Not suspect. Perpetrator? Let's go with perpetrator. I don't think that's the word I want, but whatever. Initially, she's really standoffish about it. She is not willing to be questioned, but then she realizes she could milk this. She decides to kind of start diving into what actually happened and investigating it herself. But this group of true crime fans are essentially paying her to investigate because they believe, obviously, being who she is, people will talk to her. That's about where I am so far. There are also chapters through the perspective of the mother in the past, as well as the son in the past. It is almost immediately clear to me that this kid is just like a typical teenager who is scared of everything and trying to fit in and wants to seem cool, especially given the situation his family is in. He resents his mother for being poor. And then we see on the opposite side that the mom is doing everything she can to try and take care of her family. It's really bleak. It is really bleak. At one point, I did actually kind of debate DNFing this because there was something that happened on page that I wasn't expecting. I knew Gillian Flynn's books went pretty dark. I didn't really expect this. I guess to be fair, this is what happens when I don't look into trigger warnings. I wouldn't say it's a trigger for me, but it's not exactly something I want to read or feel comfortable reading. And while I do think it was meant to unsettle me and make me dislike this character and, like question this character more, I could have done without that, honestly. Yeah, but I've heard so many positive things about this author. When looking at my friends' ratings of this book, it's got so many 5 stars. So I decided to kind of skim over all that physically and then have dived a little bit deeper into the audiobook. We'll see how it goes. It's also pretty slow moving. I'm around 100 pages in, and I felt that 100 pages. It's gonna be a little bit of a slog, and I have a feeling that I'm probably going to need to pick up a cutesy romance after I finish this book because it's probably gonna be really rough. friends, it is Thursday. I'm sorry I didn't think to update last night because I had a pretty busy day yesterday. Immediately after work, I had to jump into making dinner because I had my romance book club, and then I ran over there, ended up staying a little late, just hanging out. It was very fun as per usual. One of our wonderful ladies is a crafter, and she always comes in with bookmarks and cute little stickers for us, but specifically, I just wanted to show this one off. I love it. Adorable. I actually talked about A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske, which was my first book of the year, and I loved it, so I was really glad to finally gush at somebody because this is for a specific video that won't be coming out for another month or so, but I really enjoyed it. On to Summerween stuff. I actually blasted through almost the entire audiobook of Dark Places by Gillian Flynn yesterday. This was a weird reading experience. By the time I got home, I think I had like an hour left in the audiobook, and after eating dinner, I found a way to finish listening to the audiobook before I finally just like laid down, read the rest of it. I will say I did skim read the ending, and I want to be honest with y'all. I don't freaking know how I feel about this book. Like, I don't know how to rate it. Objectively, I think Gillian Flynn is a good author. Like, I think the writing of this story was well done. I don't like the ending, and from what I've seen of other reviewers, it seems like I'm in good company. There are a lot of conveniences with the ending. I don't think a single character in this book was particularly likable, and I do believe that that's sort of like Gillian Flynn's thing, is she writes unlikable characters, but you get invested into the story and you want to watch it play out. Unlike B.A. Paris, it was like I had to know. I had to figure out what was going on. And even as the story continued and it starts getting like more and more depressing, I still needed to know. Oh, my coffee's boiling. I'm making coffee real quick. I guess, wait, I have this so I can keep talking to you now. So we have our three main characters that we see through. We have Libby, who I talked about before is like completely detestable at the beginning. But I will say, I think she was developed quite well to the point that by the end of the book, it was like, I don't like Libby, but I hope this brought her some closure, and I hope she is able to move on with her life finally. Or at the very least, improve her relationship with those around her. Let me set a timer. When it came to the mother character, Patty, I honestly just felt bad for her. I just felt like this poor woman was doing everything she could to try and make her life work and to take care of her children. What's revealed in her timeline, I didn't love, because I don't feel like it made sense for the character Flynn had developed. I think it was a cool twist to utilize something she had very offhandedly mentioned earlier on in the book, and like, oh, see, this was actually more important than you thought it was. The logic of it doesn't really work. Ben's chapters were really rough for me. Honestly, every single time I read them, I felt like I needed to take a shower afterwards. And I get the perspective that Flynn was writing with it, where Ben essentially is just this kid who is determined to fit in, wants to be acknowledged as like a man, but he doesn't really fit like the stereotypical macho man that people conjure in BFN. He's really lost, and he's just like trying to find a place for himself. Flynn could have very easily taken this in like culty direction because of that. I think Ben would have been like the perfect patsy for a cult, but doing it through the lens of the Satanic Panic was interesting. I'm pretty familiar with the Satanic Panic because I did a really big project on a major case of it in college. So I totally see the angle Flynn was writing about it. There's just aspects of it that bugged me, and I didn't love looking at them in like the grand scheme of Flynn's work, I guess is how I'll say. It's really hard to talk about this without getting into spoilers. All that said though, again, I feel like Flynn is a really good writer, because in Ben, she really did create a character that like I hated being in his head. I did not want to read his chapters, but I did. Libby, by comparison, though she does get this development over the story, I wish we would have gotten more time with her to really see the change in her, because things start out mainly focused on Libby, but as the story continues, Patty and Ben's perspectives start to become more relevant and start to obviously become more at the forefront as you're learning what's going on. And it made me miss Libby's chapters. Tying this into my favorite book of last year, Flynn can write unlikable female characters very well. She can write many different variations of them, and she can make you hate them for a myriad of reasons. I appreciate that she lets these characters have more depth, but I feel like she did start to fall into the trap of the characters becoming no more nuanced than the label she gives to them. So I haven't done a cop pile breakdown for this yet, but I I don't know how it's gonna go. I can say though that I am a little intrigued to try watching the movie just to see like how does this story play out on the big screen, especially since I do feel like Flynn overwrote this. So I finished this out last night, and then this morning Sam woke Josh and I up both way too early. Josh decided to just go ahead and head to work. So I got up and started to read my novella of Cattle and Men, and I finished that one out, which my timer just went off for my coffee. So I'm gonna go make that, and we'll keep talking because I have this new microphone. It was really short. It's only like 100 pages. And by the end of it, I do feel like this is a good novel to get you thinking about the morality of eating animals, and also like the line of sentience. And are animals aware or unaware as some people think they are? Do they have the same free will as humans or not? And because of the basis of the story, it all ties back into the meat industry and meat packaging and kind of the whole people don't really want to know how the sausage gets made. Well, I do think this was very thought-provoking. In the end, I didn't feel super strongly about this book in any way, shape, or form. I haven't read Tender is the Flesh, but from my understanding, this seems to hit on a lot of the same points. But I also feel like some of these topics I did discuss in my philosophy classes feel as though this isn't anything new to me per se. Maybe that's why I didn't feel incredibly moved by it. I also said previously, I live in beef country. I'm pretty familiar with like the food industry, so I do sort of know what goes into the sausage getting made. That wasn't new information for me either. So like I said, overall, I think this was a punchy little novella that can get you thinking if you've never really considered some of these questions or ideas before, but it didn't really cover anything new for me specifically. I haven't done a compile for this one yet either, but I would estimate it's like gonna be around a 3-star. And so on that note, seeing as how it's Thursday morning, we technically still have, you know, a good few hours left of Winterween, and I'm already finished. And I did complete like my little mini goal of a different book for every single prompt, y'all. I'm very proud of myself. So I'm going to do a quick little run through of those just to finish things out. So starting at the top, read a book in the dark. I read Of Cattle and Men on my phone, mostly late at night or in the early morning. So to read a horror or a thriller book, I tried to read The Breakdown by B.A. Paris, but unfortunately ended up DNFing it. I'm going to let the DNF stand just because I don't really want to push through another book right now, honestly. After the last one, I think I need a romance. To read a book with house in the title or on the cover, I read This Cursed House by Del Sandine. Y'all know how this went. For a horror book published 5 or more years ago, though Dark Places is technically a thriller, it definitely has some horrific elements, so I'm gonna say this works. And then finally, to read a novella, a manga, or an audiobook, I read Mieruko-chan Volume 1 by Tomoki Uzumi. Guys, I'm so proud of myself that I actually managed this. This is the energy I do want going into the rest of 2025. You know, I don't want to continue with these DNFs and like books that I have no idea how to feel about. I want to keep riding that train of working through books quickly, you know, so long as I'm enjoying them still. So on that note, that is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a coffee cup emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me and a Patreon linked in the description. My Valentine's Day readathon was just announced, so if you're intrigued about that, join us. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye! Oh crap, that's still really hot.